What's in a name? For parks, the name of a coaster means a lot. It can be used to advance a theme. It can be used to market the ride. There are so many cool names out there, and there's absolutely no rule against reusing a name. Thanks to Zachary Fonts for pitching this video idea. It made me very curious about which names are the most popular. There are over 11,000 coasters in the roller coaster database. I gathered all of them, stuck them all in Excel, and it spit out everything I needed to know. These are the world's most used coaster names. I'm going to start with the whole world, and at the end, I'll cover just America to see how different it is. Number 20, Tornado, 47 coasters. The first Tornado opened in 1926 at Coney Island, but it really took off in popularity over the last 50 years, mainly used on steel coasters. That being said, you of course have Tornado at Adventureland, the wooden coaster from 1978, and the best Tornado is probably the one at Bakken, that crazy Intamin spinning coaster. Tied for number 18, Fruitworm Coaster, 52 coasters. As you can imagine, these are kids coasters, but they're not all the same. They're not all wacky worms. Some have a helix, some don't, but the only thing they all have in common is they're all in China. Tied for number 18, Jungle Flying Squirrel, 52 coasters. Here you go, another set of Chinese coasters. These look to be bigger than the last ones. They look more like family coasters. You know, the ones you wouldn't be completely embarrassed to ride. Number 17, Wacky Worm, 54 coasters. This is a very specific model, and honestly, this number is a lot higher than 54. I know there's a ton of coasters at state fairs called Wacky Worm, but since they're portable, they're not in the database. These are very mild kids coasters. Going up the lift, little bumps, a drop, a couple turns, and that's it. It's one of the most common models out there, and a ton of them use the name Wacky Worm. Number 16, Mad Mouse, 55 coasters. One of the most common coasters ever is the Wild Mouse, and the Mad Mouse name started being used in 1959, back when those Alan Herschel Wild Mouse coasters started opening. This would be used on other manufacturers also, like the Aero Mice at Valley Fair and Michigan's Adventure. Number 15, Cyclone, 56 coasters. You saw my parody video on this one, and this was a very popular name for wooden coasters starting in 1924. The Coney Island Cyclone made this even more popular. A lot of copycats using that name. It's still being used today, like for the Cyclone at P6 Farms in 2020, or the Cyclone that Indiana Beach just opened up last year. Number 14, Caterpillar, 58 coasters. I can't find anything with this name before 2001, but all of these seem to be wacky worms. Almost all of these are in Europe, the majority of them being in Russia. So yeah, it just seems like another name for wacky worm. Number 13, Wildcat, 60 coasters. Here's one everyone can relate to. The first one opened in 1921, a very popular name for wooden coasters into the 1930s, and then it re-emerged in the 60s and 70s with the Schwarzkopf Wildcat model. You don't find too many coasters opening up as Wildcat anymore, mainly just relocated coasters. One of the last new ones being Wildcat at Hershey Park. Number 12, Family Coaster, 62 coasters. These date back to 1995, almost all of these being in Europe and Asia, only one being in America, that being an SBF Spinner at Andretti Thrill Park in Florida. There's no uniformity here. You have all kinds of coasters on this list, but as the name would suggest, they're all small scale. Tied for number 10, Butterfly, 65 coasters. I've never seen a coaster called Butterfly, and that's because none of these are in America. These are all assigned to this Sun Kid Butterfly model. These V-shaped shuttle coasters, popular in Europe and Asia. It doesn't get much more simple than this, but these seem like fun rides for what they are. Tied for number 10, Dragon Coaster, 65 coasters. The first one opened at Wright Playland in 1929, but we didn't see another one until 1987. That's where it really took off. These are all over the place. 15 in America. I rode the one in Vegas, and it's easy to put a dragon-shaped train on a small coaster, and bam, Dragon Coaster. Again, like Family Coaster, there's no uniformity here. You'll just find some dragon theming on the train or on the station. Number 9, Scenic Railway, 77 coasters. The first one on this list goes back to 1886. The last one opened in 1951. This was the go-to name for the very early wooden coasters, most of them opening in America. Kennywood had one, Lagoon had one, Waldemere had one, but the only two that are still open aren't in America. One is in Melbourne, Australia, the other is at Dreamland in the UK. This one opened in 1920, caught fire in 2008, was refurbished and reopened in 2015. Number 8, Crazy Mouse, 85 coasters. Just like Wacky Worm, there's probably a ton more of these out there. All of those portable mouse coasters at state fairs that aren't in the database. The first one goes back to 1981, a Togo looping mouse at Tobu Zoo in Japan. It doesn't matter the manufacturer, this is a popular name worldwide, and one of my most recent credits was a Crazy Mouse. This Zamperla spinning mouse coaster at Tropic Falls. Number 7. Little Dipper, 90 coasters. This implies there's a Big Dipper, or a Giant Dipper, or a regular dipper, but those aren't in my top 20. There are only 38 Big Dippers, 8 Giant Dippers, 6 Deep Dippers, and only 4 Dippers. This dates back to Cincinnati's Coney Island in 1912. Became very popular in the 1940s and 50s, mostly small wooden coasters, or Alan Herschel kiddie coasters. The most famous one has to be Six Flags Great America, moving to this park in 2010, but opening at Kiddieland in 1950, this being a 28-foot PTC wooden coaster. Number 6. Gliding Dragon, 92 coasters. We've seen this before. Here's another common Chinese coaster name. These are all small kids coasters, using a dragon theme, the first one popping up in 1998. These aren't the same coaster. There's some good variety here, so it's just weird they all use this specific name. Number 5. Figure 8, 105 coasters. These have different styles. Figure 8 with a number, Figure 8 with the word, and these are very old wooden coasters, the Figure 8 being in reference to its layout. The first one opened in 1889, the most recent one opening in 1938. If you want to ride one, too bad. None of these are still in operation, the last one closing in 1981. Number 4. Dragon, 136 coasters. We didn't see our first Dragon coaster until the early 80s, and it's taken off from there. We just got a new Dragon at Legoland Korea in 2022 and Legoland New York in 2021. These are mostly small, but not exclusively. We have some looping mice in Russia, but there's also Dragon at Adventureland, this Hopkins looper that just closed down in 2019. Number 3. Spinning Coaster, 140 coasters. We didn't have any spinning coasters for about 50 years. It regained popularity in the early 90s, and ever since 1997, a lot of them have been called spinning coaster. This was mostly used on spinning mouse coasters in China, but starting in 2014, these became very popular on SBF spinners. Over the last 8 years, 38 of these have opened with that very simple name. Number 2. Wild Mouse, 162 coasters. Kind of the same story as Mad Mouse. This is just another variation. This gained popularity in the 1950s with the BA Schiff Wild Mice. Some wood, some steel. And there were just so many of these in the 50s and 60s. It faded away in the 80s, but when Mach and Maurer and Zamperla and E&F Myler started making Wild Mouse coasters in the 90s, it came back big time. And even this year, we have a new one coming to Cedar Point. Number 1. Roller Coaster, 368 coasters. No surprise here, this was the default name for parks with just one coaster. Instead of giving it a name, it was just the roller coaster. You see this at Lagoon with 10 other coasters, but when it opened in 1921, yeah, it was the only one. 16 coasters called roller coaster still operate today in the US. It's still being used today for small parks with one coaster, so this name will never die. Now, let's see how this breaks down in the US. There's a tie for 10th place with 28 coasters. One we saw earlier, that's Cyclone. The other is Toboggan. This is mainly driven by all those Chance Rides toboggans opening back in the 70s, but it was also a popular name for wooden coasters in the early 1900s. There's also a 3-way tie for number 7 with 29 coasters. We talked about Mad Mouse, but you also have Kitty Coaster. That one's self-explanatory. Then you have Jackrabbit. This goes back to 1901. Really a go-to name for wooden coasters in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. The last one to use the name was Celebration City in Branson. This was an E&F Myler High Miler, and after the park closed, it moved around a couple times. But you can ride it today at Fun Spot Kissimmee, now under the name Hurricane. The most famous Jackrabbits are still in operation. One at Seabreeze in New York, the other at Kennywood. 6th place goes to Wildcat with 48. Then you have Scenic Railway at 55, and a tie for 3rd place with 83 coasters. Figure 8 and Little Dipper. Taking the 2nd spot is Roller Coaster. This only has 93 in America, and this absolutely destroyed the rest of the field worldwide. It was well more than double what Wild Mouse had, but in America, Wild Mouse reigns supreme. With 108 coasters, no other coaster name is more popular in the States. I know, we all love a good Wild Mouse, and they seem to be everywhere, and here's proof. So there you go. Let me know what you think about this list. Were you expecting anything that didn't show up here? You may have expected Boomerang, that only has 37. Maybe Comet, that has 28. Or maybe Galaxy, that has 26. Or maybe just Coaster, that's down at 24. I figured Roller Coaster would win, but I am surprised that Wild Mouse beat it out in America. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like. And if you're new here and love coasters, please consider giving me a sub. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server, and my second channel where I post copyright-free off-road footage, and my baseball channel if you're psyched for the new season like I am. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.